What's the craziest thing you've walked into? Story 1. This is more in the been walked in on vein. It was my first visit back to my hometown after having been away at college, and I was having a small get-together at my father's house with a handful of friends. At the behest of my buddy Mark, we were watching a film entitled Jesus Christ Vampire Hunter, while arguing about whether it was a good bad movie or a bad movie. You know what I mean. Anyway, it was late at night, and we were all seated in the living room, quietly bickering with one another about the content and execution of the film. We had promised to keep our voices down because my father was doing his best to remain undisturbed until the following morning. Unbeknownst to us, he had taken a sleeping pill in order to help with that endeavor, and he experienced an odd side effect. "Hey guys," I heard my father say. We all looked up to see him standing there, stark naked, with his eyes fixed on the television. I start to reply as each of my friends stared at me. "Hi there, Dad. Were we being too loud?" He scratched his head absent-mindedly. "Can you turn the volume down a bit?" "Sure," I answered, clicking a button on the remote. "Why don't you go back to bed?" My father stared at the television for a moment longer. "Okay," he finally said. Despite his answer, he stayed there completely still, apparently hypnotized by the images on the screen. "Dad," I said again. It seemed to be enough. With a slow, lumbering motion, he turned and walked back to his bedroom. We heard the door close and my friends each breathed a sigh of relief. The following morning, when I asked how my father had slept, he told me about having taken the pill. "Aha," I replied. "That must be it then." "Must be what?" he asked. I shrugged my shoulders. "Well, I mean, you came walking into the living room and told us to turn down the television." "I did what?" he exclaimed. "Oh God. I was naked, wasn't I?" He had absolutely no recollection of the previous night's events, but that didn't stop him from being embarrassed by them. Story 2. New Year's Eve 2011, I was driving back up to my place of work in the mountains of Humboldt County after attending a party the night before in Tahoe. We drove all night and reached our destination at around 3 or 4 a.m. on New Year's Day. As we're pulling through the gate onto the property, I start noticing things don't seem right. I park and walk through the front door, turn left to the kitchen, and what do I see? Blood everywhere. My buddy is on his hands and knees, soaking up puddles of blood with bath towels, while my supervisor is crying in a plastic chair, saying he hopes his homie doesn't die. I'm absolutely flabbergasted, so I start yelling, what the hell happened here? It looks like a goddamn murder scene." They proceeded to tell me that C, we'll call him C, shot himself in the chest. I didn't believe them. My friend gets off his hands and knees, covered head to toe in blood, and comes over to me, stares me dead in the eyes, and says, "No, for real, serious as a heart attack," grabbed the .45 Glock and shot himself through the chest in front of our 6 friends at around midnight. Apparently, a friend of mine jokingly said, "Hey, did you know it's impossible to shoot yourself just using the same hand you're holding the gun with?" And right, C gets up, grabs his .45 cal Glock pistol, holds it against his chest cavity, proceeds to blow a quarter-sized hole through his chest, through the kitchen wall and into the barn door in the backyard. He thought the gun wasn't loaded. It was. C survived, but missed all major organs and his heart. Has a major scar and a Darwin Award-worthy story to tell his grandchildren now. Worst New Year's ever. Story 3. I used to work for a large grocery store chain. Apparently, all the kids do was screw each other. I walked into the produce cooler one night just in time to prevent a gang situation. I believe it to be a rape because the girl seemed relieved. It was probably the most messed up thing I've ever had to disperse. Add. Alright. The cooler was in the back. The girl was lying down on a pallet getting undressed by Beefcake and 4 dudes standing in a semicircle. I opened the door and walked in, and 2 dudes bolted. The other 2 dudes, standing, are in shock. I don't know why. Beefcake, who is on top of the girl, squints up at me, and I ask, "Well, boys, what is it that you are doing here?" The girl gets up and bolts, and the beef just looks pathetic, and 2 dudes just put their heads down. The girl left, and I only said, "Don't be a douchebag. Grow the F up." I was 20, not a supervisor. I just realized that something that I witnessed when I was 14 could quite possibly have been a gang essay attempt. I was at Carowinds, somewhere by the Happy Days themed restaurant. I really had to poop, but I found a men's restroom. It was hard to find and likely not very frequented, and it was just full of large black men and a smaller black woman. I'm a skinny, bony white boy who really had to poop. A lot. So I went ahead with my business, even after the initial response to my presence was to scatter. The woman who made eye contact with me kind of giggled. The dude calls to me about 90 seconds in. He says, "You shittin'?" followed by faint laughter somewhere further away. I say, "Yes." Playing cool and all, 90 more seconds and I didn't pass poop. It just crawled back into me. I stood up, washed my hands, playing it real cool, and walked out. As I'm walking out, the same guy as before calls, "It doesn't even stink," which is met with more laughter. My aunt is waiting for me outside. She asks me if I feel better. I said yes, sort of, but now I had a different stomachache. After typing that all out, I probably just walked in on a gangbang or a gangbang porno shoot, but I don't know. You tell me. Story 4. My ex was high on an air duster, mumbling to herself while she was semi-conscious on the carpet. Her arm was bent backwards while her hand was in the back of her pants. I confronted her. She mumbled, and then I realized she had pooped herself and was smearing it on the floor. She wanted to marry me. I met a guy that was getting arrested for shoplifting a crapload of air dusters and barely cleaning the sidewalk before he started huffing them and passing out. I had seen meth and heroin addicts in a better spot than that kid. That kid was just 18 and begging for one more hit of an air duster while getting loaded into a patrol vehicle. I didn't know someone could get that addicted. I worked in a not great area back in the early 90s. There was a period of time of about 3 weeks where I would find huffers passed out by the AC unit after inhaling our Freon. We ended up finding a dead one, and my boss finally caged in and electrified the fence to prevent future problems. It felt surreal. I cannot imagine this happening to someone I cared about. I'm sorry you had to deal with that. Dude, I had this happen. I was on my computer. It was like 3 a.m., and she went to go take a shower. After a bit, I kept hearing banging noises, so I was like, what the hell is going on? At this point, I hadn't even realized she was doing duster. I try to open the door, but it's locked. I kick it open. She's lying in a bathtub flopping around like a fish. I pull her out and start trying to get her attention. She's making weird noises and her eyes are rolled up in the back of her head. It was so messed up. Then 2 minutes later, she's totally normal and pissed that I kicked in the door. I recently found one of my childhood friends dead from huffing a duster. The coroner said she had been dead probably close to 24 hours by the time I found her. She still had the duster in her hand when I tried to sit her up before I realized she was dead. I guess Rig had already sat in because her arm kinda reached out towards me, and the can didn't fall when I pulled her up. Huffing duster is no joke, kids. Drugs are bad. Story 5. I walked into an unlocked bathroom stall only to find a completely naked fat kid, around 10 or 12 years old, standing on the rim of the toilet while squatting to take a poop. He immediately began screaming profanities at me as if I'm the dumbass who was butt naked in a public toilet and forgot to lock the door. I've tried, but it can't be unseen. While kind of funny, it's actually a really bad idea to stand on the rim of the toilet and squat over it. It applies all of your weight to a much smaller surface area and can break the toilet bowl. Toilet bowls are ceramic, and when broken, leave sharp, rigid edges that your naked ass will now be accelerating quickly towards. These types of accidents usually involve severe injuries due to both the fact that the sharp edges will cause very deep lacerations and also that it's immediately soaked with poop water. This is so common in some places that they have signs telling people not to do it, usually because a large number of visitors from places like China and India normally use squat toilets and don't know how to use a Western toilet. Story 6. Went bar hopping with some friends a while ago, and one of the girls in the group had a habit of running off when she got drunk and getting into trouble. As soon as we realized she was gone, everyone split up to look for her. I went to check the restrooms. The bar that we were in had one restroom for both guys and girls, but multiple stalls. I find a stall with the door slightly open and hear weird noises from inside, figuring she must be puking in there, so I barge in. It wasn't her, it was actually 3 guys in a pseudo-human centipede threesome. Backed out slowly, had a cigarette, and called it a night. I had something similar happen to me. Freshman year of college, I started to hang out with some dudes from my class. Some were freshmen like me, others were veterans. 2 of them were the best ladies' men/wingmen you could ever imagine. Always getting chicks. Every night they wanted to screw. They would. I am not even exaggerating, they were the best pickup artists I have ever seen, and they would also pick up girls for the rest of the group, and most of the time it worked. I got laid twice without even doing anything to get the girl. I was just with one of them, and he kind of flirted with the 2 girls. One for me and one for him. It was insane. They were legends. They were also those types of guys that were forever at college, like in the movie Van Wilder. They were there before me, and were were, maybe still are, there long after I was gone. They weren't there to study, they were there to party. Anyway, one night, the same thing as in your situation with a friend of ours, when we got super smashed, he had the habit of disappearing and getting into trouble. He started drinking heavily at the bar we were in, and then as always, poof, he was gone. We started to look for him, and the 2 ladies' men were also missing. It was a slow night, and that bar was even slower, so he figured out they just ditched for a while and went to pick some girls up at some other place. I was the one checking the restrooms, heard some sounds in one of them. It kind of sounded like someone was spitting, and I figured he was there ready to puke. The door was closed, and I called his name. No answer. After a few seconds, the same sound. I was also a little drunk, so I forced the door, and it gave up really easily. And there they were, the 2 stallions, one sucking the other's wang. I stood there for like 30 seconds petrified, and so did they. And then I swear to God, the guy sucking just laughs and goes, "Dude, give us some privacy," and shuts the door. I went out, remained pretty much silent, helped search for the missing dude, found the closest pub in zombie mode, and then went home to not sleep at all with that image in my head. Story 7. A guy is being stabbed in the neck at work. An artery popped, and me and 3 coworkers kept him alive until the ambulance showed up. At the same time, I had to close down the restaurant, get people out, and the other coworkers who were not managers away from the scene and up to the dressing rooms. Also cussing at people outside of the restaurant, flipping their phones up and filming/taking photos. I was 19 at the time. Pretty horrible experience overall. I'm fairly new to being an EMT, and I had my first very public cardiac arrest recently. The others were in their homes or more secluded places. This one was on the most popular train track in the Times Square, New York City subway station, with multiple ambulances, lights, and sirens outside. This guy is dead technically. We're trying to get him back. There were actually a few good signs, and people were crowded around watching and filming the scene. Same thing when we were outside running him on the stretcher to a truck. Story 8. 911 call in a poor neighborhood of a crappy city in New England. The lady can't walk, literally lives in her recliner. Now, she has a colostomy bag, so all her poop is in there, but she just pees into the chair and then sits in it. The floor is soaked and discolored and somehow both sticky and slippery. We got called because her colostomy bag was failing to vent properly and actually exploded. Can't explain the smell. No need to. I can just imagine it. When I did home cleanings, we had this one customer that everybody took turns in cleaning. She was probably in her 60s, bound to a wheelchair and had a colostomy bag, and the whole apartment had streaky poop stains from her wheeling around in her wheelchair and oozing it all out. We went there all decked up in PPE and disposable clothing and used disposable cleaning equipment and things that could be sterilized. I don't know how much y'all are getting paid up there, but I've been an EMT for 12 years. I've been licensed for 12 years. I'll put it that way. Got out of school all green and stoked about it. Worked a while, did volunteer fire and EMS for a while also, and delivered pizzas and waited tables the whole time as well. About a year ago, I decided to go full-time EMS, having to drive almost an hour from my crappy little town to work in a crappy bigger town for $10 an hour, which meant losing at least $1 on the hour to gas money. And I didn't even make it a full 6 months of full-time before going back to delivering pizzas and waiting tables as my main jobs instead. Way better money, and not having to smell crap and vomit randomly throughout the day means I'm just gonna keep hanging on to that EMT license until I move out of the state, cause here it's not worth it. Story 9. My wife and I went hiking and exploring old caves. I read of one that had a small entrance but opened up to huge as soon as you got inside. Pretty sure I went into the wrong cave. Started crawling in, dark as hell, turned on my flashlight and looked up. Thousands of freaking spiders all moving and pulsing on the ceiling of the small cave. I screamed like a child for my wife to pull me out. She grabbed my feet and dragged me out real quick. It was like the ceiling was pulsing. It was so thick and covered in spiders. I'm truly sorry. I'm just happy that my instincts were to not freeze up. It was screaming and flying. I couldn't back up very well because the opening was tight and kind of soft/almost muddy. That's when the intense fear shot through me and my heart rate was around 1,000,000. I'm sure it was all like under 10 seconds, but it felt like 30 seconds. My wife is small, but she got me out quickly as soon as she grabbed my feet. I was impressed. This reminds me of an experience I had. I was sitting at my best friend's gravesite, one that was above ground. I forget what they call them. Anyway, I'm sitting on the ground, it's 12 a.m., complete darkness out there. I feel something run across my leg. I turn on the flashlight app, start looking around, and see hundreds of daddy longlegs scurrying around. Not the end of the world, but like everyone else, I hate spiders. Still sitting with my back leaning against the gravesite, I turn the flashlight to it. There's a small crevice in the corner from the ground to the top, about 10 feet high. I shine the light, and there, thousands of black widows. I have never noped the hell out of anywhere so fast. I was 6 inches from thousands of black widows, and I sat there for 20 minutes before I realized it. It still gives me nightmares. Story 10. 2 things. The first, it was around 2000 when I went for a job interview, and apparently no one told the guy who was supposed to be interviewing me that I was to be interviewed. So some of the guys from the company pointed me to his trailer, and my dumbass, being 19, just tapped on the door twice and walked in. Well, this big nasty guy had his legs kicked up watching porn loud enough I could tell what was going on. Thankfully, I had the wrong angle on him to see anything. Needless to say, I apologized and walked straight out of there. Hate that job. The second time I got hired as the deckhand for a tugboat, and this wasn't but about 6 months later probably. Anyway, I walk onto said tugboat, and the first thing you see when you go in is the galley. Well, I saw some pots with some baking soda on the side of them and smelled that smell, if you know what I mean. I had Coke a few times by then, and I knew what was up when I walked in. The captain and the mate were cooking crack on the boat, so I called the company and told them I appreciate the offer, but I won't be working for them. Not going hundreds of miles offshore with crackheads driving me around. No thanks. Coke is actually quite common for those types of jobs. In fact, the floating processors, the people who receive fish freshly caught and help resupply the fishing boats, will often also supply the crew with the Coke. Coke helps the crew work for longer periods of time, which means the crew catches more fish, and all parties involved make more money. I'm not saying it's right or okay to be sailing around with a bunch of crackheads, but it is common. Source: I live in Alaska. I know plenty of fishermen. Story 11. I could hear one of my employees moaning at pictures on a work computer. I walk into the office like, what the hell, dude? Are you really looking at that crap on a company computer? I see the screen. No joke, this fat dude is moaning over pictures of lasagna all by himself. I laughed so hard I thought I was going to pass out. Story 12. Growing up, my brother and I would play a prank on each other where we would put ourselves in a situation to fart in each other's faces. For example, he would be taking a poop in our bathroom, which had a sliding pocket door right in front of the toilet. I would sling the door open and fart because his face would be pretty close to my butt. It was all fun and games. Then one day, my brother yells at me from his room asking if I want to play Nintendo 64 with him. Of course I did, so I fling open his door to play, only to see him standing on a chair with his naked ass right in front of my face. His timing was impeccable. His sphincter control was not. He sharded all over my face. I was in the shower for about 5 seconds. He was on the floor laughing. My parents refused to believe that he crapped all over my face until he finally admitted it at my wedding a couple of years ago. Story 13. As a young teenager, like 13 or 14, I had a job as a weekend stock boy at a neighborhood deli. Always 2 clerks on duty on weekends. Way too busy. We kept the beer in the basement. It's my job to move it up to the walk-in when I've put the last pack on the shelf. Unknown to me, one of the clerk's boyfriends had come in while I was restocking the walk-in shelves. I came out of the walk-in and went straight to the basement. There was one of the clerks, pants at ankles, her BF right behind her, railing her like there was no tomorrow. She screamed, "Get out," at me. I ran back upstairs, straight into the walk-in. 10 minutes in there, processing what I had just seen. In comes the BF. I couldn't look at him. Got my first man talk from him. Then he got his girl, and she came into the walk-in. He made me look her in the eye so that she could apologize to me. It was still a few hours before I could talk to her in anything more than a mumble with my eyes on the ground. And when I later relayed the story to my friend, the only response I got was, "You should have asked for a turn." Story 14. Just my soon-to-be wife cheating on me. I broke, man. I literally felt something in me die. This was 5 years ago, and only in the last 8 or 9 months have I felt better about it. I walked into my apartment, and she and her ex-husband were in my bed, which was a huge FU to me, cause they both had their own places. So I walk in, see them, grab him by the throat, I know, drag him outside, and throw him into the parking lot. I'm a big dude. I'm 6'8" and 220 pounds. So I throw him into the parking lot, and she's yelling at me, "Please don't kill him." WTF, I just wanted him out of my house. I wasn't going to hurt or kill the guy. She's running around, picking up her things and his things and shouting excuses at me. "Oh, it was just a one-time thing. We were bored and it was a mistake. We were drinking this morning and this was stupid." Who drinks in the morning anyway? I just looked at her and said, "Don't ever speak to me again. You disgust me." Then I fell onto my couch and cried. She was standing there watching me, and she tried to walk over and hug me, because now she's crying too. I pushed her away from me. I cried non-stop for the rest of the day, fell into a deep, deep depression and started taking painkillers, drinking, and pretty much every drug I could get my hands on. I hurt so badly mentally that it was physically crippling. The hardest part wasn't even breaking up with her. It was not talking to her daughter, who was going to be my stepdaughter. I was even saving to buy the ring. She and I were buds, man. We went everywhere together. I took her to preschool, we'd go to the mall every Friday and get ice cream, and I'd buy her some toys or some clothes or whatever struck my eye. I've since moved to a different state, got a good job, and got my life back together, and have an amazing girlfriend. She looks at me with love, and I look at her, and I see hope in her eyes. It took years, but things finally actually turned around. Story 15. I worked for a cleaning company when I was in high school. We got an emergency call to clean up a private residence. I was the only one who could go. The folks had a Great Dane. They also had a gallon of peanut oil. The dog knocked the peanut oil over and it spilled everywhere. Then, being an opportunist, the dog lapped up all of it that he could. I imagine the real issues started a couple of hours later as the dog began getting the runs. It evidently scared him. He must have sprinted throughout the house with the oily runs chasing him as he fled. There was even a trail across their long mahogany dining table. Story 16. When I was 16 years old, I was extremely self-destructive, idiotic, and alcoholic. I was hanging out at a friend's house one snowy winter night, and we were drinking peppermint schnapps and Milwaukee's Best Light. My friend was one of those guys in high school whose parents didn't mind if he drank in the house. His mom was a laid-back hippie lady, and his stepdad was a mild-mannered biker dude who let us do what we wanted, as long as we didn't get too rowdy or smoke all their weed. So we were just kicking back, watching USA Up All Night, and getting hammered. At some point in the evening, my friend got sick and ended up locking himself in the bathroom, puking his guts out. Lightweight. I soldiered on with the schnapps for a bit and eventually passed out on the couch. When I came to, I had the unmistakable feeling that I was about to poop my pants. I ran to the bathroom door. Locked. I knocked and loud whispered for my friend to open the door. No response. My mind went into a crazy about to poop your pants mode, and I remembered that the dude's parents had another bathroom in their bedroom. Okay, no problem. I can just sneak in there surreptitiously and take a dump. As I crept into their room in a delirious haze of booze, adolescent stupidity, and impending butthole disaster, it was immediately apparent that his parents were not asleep. There were noises, and as the light from the living room poured in, I could see the humping, grunting forms of two slightly overweight copulating adults. In retrospect, the correct thing to do in that moment would have been to slink out and go poop in the backyard or maybe take a dump in the kitchen garbage can. Hell, it would have made more sense to poop in the cat box than to do what I did, which was quietly tiptoe across the room towards the bathroom, with the inane hope that I would go unnoticed. They noticed. Their undulating screwing movements ceased, as did their bestial love wails. I said something ridiculous like, "Don't mind me, just off to take a poop," and proceeded into the bathroom. I got my pants down just in time for a hot jet of schnapps/beer diarrhea to shoot out of my behind. And at that very moment, before my mind could even really register the relief, my friend's buck-naked stepdad kicked in the door and punched me square in the face multiple times. I tried to voice my protest, but as I did so, I began throwing up. Stepdad grabbed me by the shirt and dragged me puking, bleeding, poop-covered, and begging for mercy out the back door and threw me into a snowdrift. I paused there for a moment and then cleaned myself off with some snow and pulled up my pants. By that time, the mom had dressed and she came outside and gave me a ride home. We both apologized and she asked me not to mention what happened because the stepdad was on parole. I never mentioned it to anyone and we all stayed pretty friendly afterward, which seems weird in retrospect. Story 17. I've stated this story in the past, but it fits with what you wanted. One of the craziest things I have ever walked in on was a night I was working late at the local video store, and I went to take the garbage out. I walked over to the dumpster across our parking lot, and as I neared, I could hear someone letting out what sounded to me like a cross between crying and whimpering in the bushes behind the dumpster. So I dropped the trash in and went to investigate. As I approached, the sound got louder, and whoever it was started to kind of call out incoherently. As I came around a tree, I found the source of the noise. It was a woman huddled in the fetal position who had been lit on fire. Her flesh was charred in spots, or looked almost white, melting like wax. I quickly ran back to the store. This was a few years ago, before everyone had a cell phone, and called the ambulance and police. I then got to wait with her, trying to comfort her until they arrived. As it turned out, she was one of the local winos, and a group of girls aged 12 to 14 had beat her up, covered her in lighter fluid, lit her on fire, and left her to die. The image of her curled in the fetal position, still smoking, has burned into my brain for life. Kids are sometimes the worst. I was drunkenly longboarding my way to a party in a kind of sketchy neighborhood, and a group of probably 7 or 8 13 to 15-year-old kids asked me for a cigarette, to which I responded that I didn't smoke. I thought it was strange, since it was almost 1 a.m. and on a Tuesday, that even if I did smoke, I wouldn't have stopped. Next thing I know, my ear is ringing, and I'm having rocks, bottles, shoes, and almost anything these kids could grab thrown at me. I passed a cop who noticed these little hoodlums throwing things and stopped them. I talked to her for a little bit and realized there was a much worse gang problem in that area. Story 18. I used to work for a cell phone store a couple of years ago. Our customers were mainly gangsters and organized crime who always came for ghost lines and disposable phones. My boss knew them all on a first-name basis, but I thought nothing of it. One day, as I came to open up shop, I was the manager, I unlocked the door, opened it, and found myself face to face with his hanging body. It was messed up. Later on, I found out he owed a lot of money to a loan shark. I'm not sure why. He was a good guy. I still miss him. Story 19. Probably when I was in tech school and worked security at a 12-plex movie theater, eventually becoming security manager. Wasn't hard. With the turnover rate there, I got it in 4 months. Being the manager gave me a set of keys and the only one with the ability to patrol the roof, where the doors to the projector booths were. I caught 2 female assistant managers on the floor going at it, a male and a female assistant manager going at it. The ironic thing was that this was about 2 weeks later and the female was one of the females in the item above. Managers making out with or doing things more than that in theaters with movies running, with snack bars or other workers. Theater 6 was the smallest and most popular for this. Usually the longest running and thus lowest attended movies were in there. The theater manager was caught by his wife in his office with a girl who was a bit under 18. I should have taken notes, changed names, and written a book. All kinds of other stuff happened as well, but those were the ones highest on the scale. It was the oddest 18 months of my life, but it sure paid the bills. Because I didn't tell people, I had a lot of people there come to me and tell me other things I didn't see as well. It was a real-life soap opera. Story 20. When I was, I believe, 6 or 7, I was staying at a friend's house for the night. We played action figures and watched Night of the Living Dead on Betamax, then went to bed. I was in a sleeping bag on the floor. He was in his bed. I woke up at some point, propped up against the wall, sitting on his bed. He was sitting up in his bed, talking. I couldn't make out what he was saying except for the last part. "I now pronounce you man and wife. You may now kiss the bride." He then leaned towards me with his lips puckered. My natural reaction was to hit him in the chin with the palm of my hand. Blood spurted out of his mouth, and he laid back down and started snoring. I crawled back to my sleeping bag and fell asleep. The next morning, I woke up to pancakes, bacon, and Transformer cartoons, and my friend's dad saw me walk into the kitchen, looked me in the eye, and said, "Did he have one of them night talks again?" "Yes, sir. I'm sorry." "No, it's okay. Little bastards kissed me too." Story 21. Went into a bathroom at a gas station and saw a man who was probably about 400 pounds standing at the urinal, with his pants down around his ankles. So I'm laughing as I go to use the stall because this giant man's ass cheeks are just hanging out, until I hear him start to moan really loud, like almost to the point of yelling. Pretty sure the guy was rubbing one out while standing at the urinal. Either that or he had just taken the best piss of his life. He continued to stand there at the urinal while moaning as I washed my hands. I was just laughing and disgusted at the same time. Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story to these that you would like to share with us, please leave it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.